Hmm? Well, good evening. Welcome to the Lawrence City Commission meeting. We'll start today with the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that's been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items that a commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda? Is there anything that a member of the public would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, including all claims.
Second. We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next is public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items. Could we close the door back there, please? Someone? Thank you, Larry. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up, if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments or questions to the commission. Any general public comment this evening? Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda items. Our first item has been deleted. The second item is to conduct a public hearing to consider a vacation request, vacate 15 feet of right-of-way on 12th Street, adjacent to the north side of 1201 Connecticut Street. Hello, David.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Dave Cronin, City Engineer with the MSO. The proposed vacation tonight for the 15 feet adjacent to lot 141, also known as 1201 Connecticut Street, is shown here on the attached image, 15 feet north of the lot along 12th Street. 12th Street is classified as a residential street, which requires a minimum right-of-way of 60 feet per our subdivision regulations. The existing right-of-way of 12th Street is 100 feet, with the exception of a couple of lots in the vicinity. One's at 1200 New York, where 15 feet of right-of-way has been vacated, and one is at 1145 Pennsylvania, where 10 feet of right-of-way has been vacated in the past. Per our procedures, property owners within 200 feet of the proposed vacation request were notified and no objections were received. No utilities are located in the proposed area, and the vacation will not impair the ability of utilities to deliver services in the area. Staff recommends approving this order of vacation. Let's stand for any questions.
Questions for David? Okay.
I move we open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Soden, second from Vice Mayor Larson to open a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is open on the vacation request.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is KT Welsh. I have no objection to this, but I just wondered, in Mr. Cronin's research, did he find out why the property didn't go to the sidewalk just for historic purposes? We were just curious. Thank you.
Other comment for the public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Soden, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. David, do you want to answer KT's question, please?
This area is in the original plat for the city. So when it was originally platted, it was platted with 100 feet of right-of-way. A lot of, back when this was platted, a lot of the streets were platted with very large right-of-ways. And so our new standards is 60 foot for a residential area, so that's why it's different, but it's just the way it was originally platted. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we've conducted the public hearing. The action is to consider the order of vacation for 1201 Connecticut Street. Commission discussion?
I have no objection.
I'd move that we approve the order of vacation for 1201 Connecticut Street.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, David. Thank you all. The third item is to conduct a public hearing to consider a request for a Catalyst Incentive Program.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Britt Crumcano, City Economic Development Coordinator. Tonight you have a request from Grandstand, also known as Screen It Graphics, for participation in our Catalyst Incentive Program. Grandstand is a homegrown business that started very, very small and has grown by leaps and bounds. It now resides in East Hills Business Park, and it has grown to the point where it needs additional space. So it is proposing 112,000 square foot addition to their existing facility. Now, if you recall, the Catalyst Incentive Program is a streamlined program. It offers 50% tax abatement on real property automatically, and up to 70% if the building is built to LEED Silver equivalency, not necessarily certified, but just built to that standard. Typically, if it's on city land, we offer no-cost city land. And also, we typically offer an IRB for sales tax exemption. In this case, Grandstand owns their own property, and the expansion will be built on their own property, so there's no need for additional land request. And also, they're going to go through a state program to get their sales tax exemption, so they're not requesting the IRB. So it's just the property tax abatement. Now, at this point, I have Chris Piper, who's the owner of Grandstand, here to tell you a little bit more about the business and their project. But before I turn it over to him, do you have any questions I'd be happy to answer?
Questions from Brett? No?
How's that look?
Good evening. My name's Chris Piper, president, owner of Grandstand. I thought I'd give you a brief history rundown of our company, briefly, and then answer any questions that you might have. We enjoyed our 30th year in business this year. We were started in June of 1988. Bought a small t-shirt printing company that was in the back of Jayhawk Trophy, which is still here. Monty Hobbs had started a t-shirt part of his business and then got smart and decided he wanted to sell it. And so I was able to purchase that and start a little t-shirt business. We were located in the Northeast Industrial Lane where UPS is. We had about 1,000 feet there. And early on we got into printing plastic containers. Back then, which is the old days, there weren't such a thing as a sport bottle. And so we thought it'd be a great idea to start printing these items, which was new to the market, which everybody has now. Subsequently, we were able to start decorating larger volumes for Packer Plastics, which is now Berry Plastics, and that kind of got us into containers. T-shirt business is a tough business, and so containers was an offshoot for us. As all plastic things do, that eventually went over to China, and so we were looking for other things to do with our container printing machines. And fortunately for us, Free State Brewery was a customer of ours. They started in 1989, we started in 88, and they were buying apparel from us. So we kind of got into that market. They came to us with some glass and asked us if we could do it. We could, and eventually we identified that the craft brewery market, which everybody knows now, would be a good growth market, and there was nobody back then doing it. And so it was good for us. It established an identity for us. We grew from there. We went over to Delaware Street and had 10,000 square feet, and then subsequently grew some more. Went to Haskell, where the Hyper building is now. I'm not sure actually if they've remodeled that or not, but we had 30,000 square feet there. And then we just continued to push in that market. It really provided an identity to us that was outside the t-shirt market, because as everybody probably knows here, you know somebody that prints t-shirts or knows somebody that knows somebody, and so it's a tough business. We had tremendous growth, and in December of 2011, we came in front of the commission here because we had reached a point that we couldn't grow any longer. Part of the equipment that we have are 100-foot Lears, which is basically a big oven, and we needed more space. Fortunately for us, the Sauer Danfoss building was available, 150,000 feet, and it was a huge, huge jump for us. I think eventually it was $4.2 million purchase, or maybe more, and we were able to, with the City Commission's help, also the Chamber's help, economic development, make that jump. And I think back to those days, and that was a big jump for us. It was a total investment of $5 million. And from that point, we really had a good identity for us. We were able to reach on a national basis, and it really was a legitimizing point in our growth. And so that was a tremendous a boon for us. And I think here on one of these slides we might show our 2011 numbers. We started, when we moved into that facility in 2011, we had 45 people. Since then, we have grown to 218. Our payroll was 1.8 million. Our annual payroll now is 9 million. We've been able to grow individual wage growth as well. Average annual wage is now at 47,000. And one of the important things I think to note here on this slide as well is that 95% of our revenues are outside the state of Kansas. And that kind of gets to what some of the issues that we have as a company. It's fantastic to be in Lawrence, Kansas, besides the fact that I grew up here, but geographically we can ship to the entire country. The downside of that is most of our customer base is a ways away from us. And so when you're shipping glassware, it's a heavy item, and freight is a huge component of it. And so we run into some issues when we run into geographically, a decorator might be in Virginia or Michigan or Dallas or California, that we are competing with them on the same playing field, but we have to ship it quite a ways to do that. So it's a battle that we have every day. And so one of the growth vehicles for us has been the freight and logistics side of our business. So I don't know if you've seen our trucks running around town, but we have 2 over-the-road trucks now that we actually haul glassware to the East Coast and bring back blank glassware. That we do the same in the Southeast, and we're getting ready to add another truck because inbound freight is a huge, huge expense. It's gone up 300% just in the last year alone. So these are some of the battles that we have. We added 2 years ago, I think, a warehouse over at the old E&E facility, so another 70,000 feet. So our environment that we have now in our current facility is a totally air-conditioned facility. And what we are wanting to do is we have the 70,000 square feet, and we're driving a truck back and forth multiple times a day with glassware. So we put 2 days worth of glassware in our current facility. So what happens then is now we're kind of utilizing our production facility for inventory space as well. So one of the big things that we've been looking at doing for the last couple of years since we added the 70,000 feet leasing the other space was to consolidate and get it on premise so that we can move all of our glassware out of our air-conditioned production facility and move it into a facility right next to us, connected, that would allow us to grow our production. So where we're at right now is we're looking at adding 112,000 feet of additional warehouse space at approximately $5 million investment in that building alone. Plus, we have 2 pieces of equipment that we are purchasing this year that will be $3 million in investment. And actually, we're talking about our investment's probably going to be more like 3.5 in capital expenditures for 2019. So we're excited about it. It's put us in a fantastic position for growth. We've changed our business. We've added an in-house branding agency. It's called 88 Design Group. We've added e-commerce, fulfillment operations as well, which are all higher paying jobs as well. And that's helped us grow our average wage, because production facilities sometimes are tough, especially in the decorating, but that's something we continue to drive as well. But we're excited about our growth. We've got great opportunities. We have a great group of people, 218. Our projections for 50 more people over 10 years. But we're in a situation right now that with $8 million in planned investment in 2019, that's a big number. In fact, I don't like to say it very often. I thought 4.2 was a big number, but we're excited about our growth, and we'd like you to consider voting for us on this Catalyst program. You know, I'll close with, I've been in Lawrence all my life. I'm aware of businesses coming and going. We have a proven track record. We've been here for 30 years. Every marker that we put down, we've hit. When you look at the synopsis that we do, the compliance summary that we do for the city of Lawrence, you can see all of our numbers are across the board there. Capital investment was 210%, job creation was 202%, wages were at 96%, average wage hourly was 140%, and health benefits 100% as well. So I feel like we're the type of company that this Catalyst program was designed for. We're local, we're not going anywhere. We believe in the community. We've invested over, not invested, but we've donated over $40,000 to $50,000 a year in charitable contributions with the organizations. We believe in community, and we believe in Lawrence, Kansas. So we'd appreciate your vote, and I appreciate your time. If any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And I've got somebody smarter than me to answer any real tough questions. Our CFO is here as well. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy.
I don't think we do. Thank you, though.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we're to conduct a public hearing.
I move we open the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Soden, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the hearing is open. Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, back to the commission.
Mayor, I do have one quick question for Mr. Piper.
Sure.
You talk about 50 full-time employees over the next 10 years. Do you have any idea how soon you'd be able to start that hiring? Obviously, you're not hiring all 50 at once, but how soon you think you could get this on the table to start hiring?
We have 8 jobs projected right now for 2019 first quarter that are more along the lines of the e-commerce, the agency, branding agency within, also some management level positions that we have. We have a website that's a retail-based website that we need a manager on as well. So we have 8 that are targeted already for that. Plus our new equipment is scheduled to arrive by June 1st, hopefully, and that would be another 7 jobs right
Great.
there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, this is what this program was built for. That's the whole idea behind it. So I fully support what's happened. I appreciate your business and your history, obviously, and this is what we want. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate the fact that this project is not speculative in nature. That, I mean, he has a very clear idea of where he's going. I mean, he knows to the date when his equipment's showing up and when the employees are going to have to start being hired. So it's a relief to be able to look at a project like this that we know is going to generate jobs for our community basically immediately. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think when you look at the eligibility requirements, it falls squarely under that, looking at the track record for this business in our community as well. It's promising and wonderful to hear that that is expanding and that, you know, we can foster that in some way.
Thank you for continuing to invest in Lawrence.
Okay. So the business is to consider resolution number 7275.
I'd move that.
Can I just state, can you make sure you read all the language that's in there? Thank you.
I would move that we adopt resolution number 7275, approving the project and making city findings of fact to meet state statute requirements for a property tax exemption, and adopt on first reading ordinance number 9608, granting an exemption of certain property in the city of Lawrence and ad valorem taxation for economic development purposes.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to deviate from our general procedure because we have a citizen that has come in the room that asked me for advice on how to raise an issue, and I suggested that he would be well advised to come and make public comment. Well, our meeting is proceeding very rapidly this evening, and he didn't make it here in time for our public comment. So if it's okay with everybody, I would like to include some public comment that we missed earlier. If there's no objection.
It's fine.
Okay. So, sir, going to open up for public comment. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Broley, for the time. I think I scared everybody away successfully. So, my name's Dalton Paley. I'm a property owner and business owner here in downtown Lawrence. And I've been listening to news a lot lately, and I was just in California, and it brought up this issue because I was in California, and what popped into the news feed was about a commissioner in Leavenworth making some sort of like unsightly, I don't know, improper comments during a city commission meeting, and all of a sudden Kansas got national news for essentially someone being a racist. And that was not like the impression of Kansas that I wanted people to have. And at the same time, I'm watching thousands of people be displaced by the fires in California. And literally these places, Paradise, California is the one that particularly has come to my attention, and they have no place to live and no place to go. And so rather than Kansas come out in the news for something like so obscene, I'd love for Kansas to come out in the news for something more accepting. And so I contacted Mayor Boley and asked him how we would present this idea, and he said, come here and make a public comment, and we'd see if there was, what the best way to do this was. And so my idea was for Lawrence or Kansas to come forward with a proposal for people who have been displaced by these fires as a place, this is a place where they can come. Lawrence is a town that I think is in a period of significant growth, and I think it's important that we attract people from everywhere. And the idea that so many people have been displaced by these fires presents the idea that, well, why don't we invite them here? And I don't know exactly how we do that, but I think there's jobs here, I think there's housing here, and I think that even if temporarily, we could offer a place for those people to come. And I don't know how we find funds for that, but I think it's just making a public statement by saying, like, we'll welcome you with open arms. There are so many places that are turning people away in our current culture and zeitgeist that it'd be nice for someone to open their arms and say, well, why don't you come here? I'm familiar with downtown, and I know that we're in a need of skilled labor. I'm familiar with businesses here because I'm part of a number of them. Lucky Berry Juice Cafe, I'm a partner in the Limestone business. We run a property business in downtown Lawrence that owns and manages properties. And so we're just aware from our tenants that traffic in downtown is lower than it used to be, and there aren't as many things here that we need. Labor is a problem, and finding good skilled labor is a hard thing. So my idea was to present a way, or see if there was a way that Lawrence could come out and say, well, you're welcome here. And I know my 3 minutes out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paley. I appreciate the sentiments that you have provided us tonight. And what I'd like to do is refer this to staff for them to consider what our possibilities might be. But I really do appreciate your interest in having an accepting, welcoming image for Lawrence and for our state. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I appreciate the indulgence of everyone. Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the fourth item, which is to receive a report on the strategic plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Danielle Bushcutter, Budget and Strategic Initiatives Manager. Tonight I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of where we're at with the strategic plan and ask for direction on a couple specific things, but I'll try to keep it fairly high level unless you really want to dig into any of the items in particular. So a year ago, we came before you and kind of asked you all to kind of solidify that these are the priority initiatives and critical success factors that you wanted to move forward with. So we're midway through kind of our first 2-year cycle of our strategic plan. So we'll review the plan in its entirety about a year from now, so we can align it with the election cycle. So with that, I'm going to kind of walk through the various initiatives and give you a brief update on that. The first one relates to advisory boards, and I'm actually going to skip that because we want to come back to it at the very end. Diane's prepared kind of an additional memo associated with this item, and there's a few things in particular that we want your direction on regarding that particular initiative. So starting with the second one, which is associated with professional development, and there are a number of different items in here. We do have an ongoing training program for non-supervisory staff that we put in place in kind of coordination with the strategic plan. We've had to kind of push back some of our efforts regarding succession planning and updating our performance evaluation tool, but we anticipate to be able to pick that back up and have those things completed by the end of 19, or at least have some progress for you on those items. So we're fully staffed in HR finally, and so we can put some good time and resources to some of those things that have been put on hold for a little bit. The next one relates to barriers of having high-speed fiber throughout Lawrence. We've really focused this on what are some of the barriers that we have in place. Let's look at our right-of-way policies and procedures. So we're still working through that. We've had a couple delays with that one as well, but we anticipate being able to bring forward a right-of-way ordinance at some point in 2019 for consideration, so we can make some additional progress on this initiative as well. I am really excited to report as it relates to 9th Street and how we've identified it in the strategic plan. I think this is the first item we can check off and say that we have fully completed it. So I think congratulations to you all and everyone who's worked on that. And I think is an exciting thing to really acknowledge and recognize as we're moving through this. Some of these are a little bit more ongoing in nature, and others are a little bit more, we can check it off and say we've done it. So that's one of them that I think we can check off and say that we have completed that item of the strategic plan. The next one relates to a facilities master plan. This has been budgeted for in 2019. So as we get closer to 2019, we'll be able to pick this one up and start making some real significant progress on this as well. I'm not going to go into priority-based budgeting. I was up here not too long ago giving kind of a full update on that and kind of where we are. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. But we're continuing down that process, and we'll have that ready for you for our 2020 budget. And we're really looking forward to kind of changing our budget process a little bit to incorporate that into it. So there will be more on that to come. Develop a long-term financial strategy.
So we have included several items related to this in our past budget documents. I think we talked about quite a bit during our budget process about what that 5-year fiscal forecast looked like, where fund balance is looking in the next several years. So we've included that, and that's something that we anticipate to be kind of ongoing and continuous. The one thing that's still kind of the big item under this is we have some financial forecasting software that we're hoping to really get into a good place that we can also use that for the 2020 budget development process. So we've made, I think, pretty good steps and strides and progress on that initiative, but I think that's one of those more ongoing initiatives versus one that you can check off and say that we've completed, because I think it's something we will continue to do and continue to work on. All right, the last one I'm going to give you an update on before I pass it off is the downtown master plan. So a steering committee has been identified and put together, and they've had their first meeting earlier this month. So that is in progress and moving forward as well. So unless you have any questions, I'll pass it off to Diane so we can really dig into the advisory board piece of it.
Questions for Danielle?
The facilities master plan, do we have any ideas or efforts related to renewable energy?
We're still we're not very far into that process yet. So the only thing that we've really done in terms of the master planning process is starting to collect an inventory of all the facilities that we have. So I don't think we've gotten to that point in the process yet. So the short answer is no, we haven't.
I hope we think about that in the future somehow. So maybe that's a new strategic initiative.
I had a question about the fiber, high-speed fiber. Do you know if that ordinance is going to be in the first part of 2019 or?
I don't. Brandon, I don't know if you have an update in terms of more specific timing on that you're able to provide.
Sorry, are you referring to the right-of-way ordinance?
Yeah, the right-of-way ordinance.
Right. It's been assigned to one of our actually project engineers who's kind of morphing into more of a right-of-way management sort of role through the merger process. So this particular person has a big night on December 4th in front of the City Commission, and if some of her work assignments get taken care of that evening, then actually she's going to be working on pushing that right-of-way ordinance forward starting at the beginning of the year. So there's quite a bit of work that we want to do in communicating with contractors and stakeholders who would be impacted by that, because it'll obviously affect all the work that goes on in the right-of-way. So we want to lay that groundwork before it gets to the commission, but we'll get started on it right away in January.
So we're looking at sometime early 2019?
I'd say first half of 2019. Okay. It's a pretty dense ordinance, and there'll be quite a few changes, but I think they'll all be acceptable. It's just a matter of communicating with all those folks who are going to be impacted by it.
Okay. So. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
When do we work on new strategic initiatives?
So that'll be a year from now.
Oh, okay.
So the goal was to align that process with the election cycle. So with that being next year, it'll likely be the November meeting, similar to this one of next year. Yep.
Yeah.
Of 2019.
But when the new people come on, January 2020?
Yes, they will, but at that point, hopefully that whoever is sitting at this, whoever's the governing body will at least be identified at that point. Similar to what we did last year when we, at that point, Jennifer was not yet sitting on the board, but we invited her to come and be a part of that discussion. So it'll likely function in a similar manner. Commissioner Anand, I'm sorry.
You can call me Jennifer, it's fine.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Okay, thank you.
With regard to the advisory boards, I'll refer to a memo that is in your packet. We wanted to provide you an overview of the actions that have been happening with this, the accomplishments, the items that are planned, and then some of the new items that are appearing on the action list, some of which we'd like to get some direction from you all on. So there's quite a list of accomplishments related to this item, and congratulations to all of you, because there's been a lot of City Commission action related to these. Under planned, we will plan to be talking about the Airport Advisory Board next year. There is some cleanup with regard to the city code and some of the bylaws related to the Airport Advisory Board that we would like to visit with you all about, so that's anticipated for next year. The review of the Mental Health Board and the Lawrence Douglas County Advocacy Council on Aging are two items that were discussed as part of the city-county school district meeting that was held in September. So there's some looking at those boards that will be coming up as well. And then we have the merging of the various code boards. We had talked about putting all those code boards together, but at the time when we bring to you the new adoption of the new codes, because we thought it was important for the groups as assembled to continue their work on those codes. So there's a couple of new items that you'll see on our action plans. The first item is engaging the Women's Foundation, and that has already occurred. In fact, there was a meeting here earlier this month, I believe, with the Women's Foundation trying to engage more numbers of women applicants for board and commission vacancies. So that's ongoing. Then,
excuse me, Diane. I'd like to point out that Vice Mayor Larson was also in attendance at that meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Thank you both for attending that. And then we have been looking at some potential software to assist with the management of these advisory board and committees. Right now, this is a fairly manual process with regard to keeping track of all these different terms and the membership on the board. So that's something that we are looking at to improve our accuracy with. And then a couple of items that we wanted to kind of bring back before you, and these are ones that we would like to get some feedback from you on. So when we made the original report at your work session in August of 2017, one of the items on the staff list as recommended was consideration of the repeal of the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee. So as a result, there wasn't really any discussion, as I recall, at that work session on that item, so it kind of fell off our list. But we think it may be worthy for getting some feedback from you all if you would like to consider that. That committee has reduced its meeting schedule pretty significantly over the last number of years. Right now they're meeting quarterly. That really consists of them reviewing some reports related to agencies, and we kind of have a summary there for you. So our thought is that the regular function of the committee could be eliminated as a standing committee of the city, but that if in the future it's an issue that requires a task force that could be assembled to focus on this issue, or it may be able to be incorporated as part of another existing board if that would be appropriate. So some of those thoughts for you. And then the other item had to do with our thought about merging the Community Development Advisory Committee into the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So we originally had a recommendation for you that would have merged the Community Development Advisory Committee into the Social Service Funding Board. And this is the CDAC is the board that reviews the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, and home funds that come to the city, and that board makes recommendations onto you. In looking at the function of that, of course, a lot of those monies could be utilized for affordable housing. Some of them are the home funds, for example. And we think that in re-looking at this, a better alignment might be to have that be part of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board's function. So those are some thoughts for you, and I think with regard to these last two items, we would like any direction that you could provide us this evening.
Okay, questions for Diane?
For the CDAC board, have you guys gotten any input from the neighborhoods or anything like that yet?
With both of these items, the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee and the CDAC, we have not talked with the boards about that. They saw some of this back in in August of 2017, the initial proposals to do something with these boards, but we haven't engaged them in any of these recommendations at this point. So that could be a step if you wanted us to visit with the boards or.
And the neighborhoods,
Get
not
any
just
comment.
the boards, but the neighborhoods. I would be happy to get feedback on them from that.
Other questions for Diane? Okay, so I appreciate the work that y'all are doing on this. This is a
It's a lot of
topic
steps.
that's near and dear to my heart.
There's been a lot of staff members involved in this one.
Yeah. And I think we're making progress. I really appreciate that, so thank you. You know, one of the things I've talked to a few people about on the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee is how much staff time it takes to staff that, not just from the city's point of view, but also from the agencies whose reports they're reviewing. And, you know, I think that that's a consideration that we have to keep in mind and say, is this, you know, commission essentially providing us with information that we need to make our decisions? I don't see that. I mean, I think they're reviewing the reports from the agencies, doing their minutes, and then meeting again next quarter. So, you know, I respect what staff is saying on this repeal, and I think that's something we ought to take very seriously. We do have the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, which we did not have when this was created.
Right.
And there's a lot of action and a lot of effort that's going on through those folks. And there'll be even more if we do the CDAC responsibilities. Now, my understanding of your recommendation here is that not that we add the CDAC members to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, so it would make it 22 or 27 or whatever.
Correct.
So essentially, the responsibilities of the CDAC would go to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
Yes, and we've done that with several other boards where we've taken the function of the board and just rolled it into an existing board and revamped that and then repealed the other.
And with regard to the original recommendation that we combine the CDAC and the Social Service Funding Advisory Board, I see some real possibility there because you have people who've been considering these kinds of things. I have not been making appointments to these boards to the extent that they would be fully staffed, so there are some vacancies on some of these boards. Further, I'm interested in kind of changing the focus from the Social Service Funding Advisory Board to essentially concentrate on the alcohol tax fund and then consider the general fund allocations through staff purposes, given that we're going to priority-based budgeting. I mean, for those allocations that we're doing through general fund, I think that could go through easily our priority-based budgeting. And some of the background for that is that the county has a significant role in social services, given the Constitution of the state of Kansas. So if we're going to be putting some of this stuff into the conversation with the county, that may well better be handled through staff and commission than through a funding advisory board. So that's what I've been thinking about on these topics. And I invite, you know, anybody else to say what they've been thinking about.
Well, I appreciate your ideas. I think that there's a lot of threads of what you're talking about, so nothing that we can decide tonight. That's why I think that getting feedback from the boards and the neighborhoods and maybe even the agencies that get funding from the Social Services Board might be a good idea first. I certainly understand the interest in priority-based budgeting and perhaps drawing direct connections between the social services funding to priority-based budgeting. But, you know, we haven't implemented priority-based budgeting. You know, that's an idea that's a year or two out in the future, so.
I think
we'll be doing that next year.
Yeah, we're doing it for 2020.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is when we finish implementing it and actually get our heads wrapped around it, is when that kind of idea would be revisited. 'cause it's
I
very
see that as something
speculative
that we
right
do
now.
as we go into, and again, with the conversations with the county about roles, that's wrapped into this as well.
I don't know about that. That seems a little speculative right now as well. I don't think that we're in a good position at this point to pursue potential directions for things until we have a further foundation for dealing with the county, dealing with priority-based budgeting. It's a little early for these ideas, is all I'm saying.
I do think there's some merit here to consider it, because I do like the idea of, with the Social Services Funding Board, of the idea of pulling that apart to where we're allocating the alcohol funding. And it's just like we have the fund for the transient guest tax, we should have a fund for the alcohol fund, you know, just the same, almost along the same line, so that way all that money's allocated under the same guise. The social services funding, as far as, I mean, it would still be there to a certain degree, but it would be handled at a staff level versus a committee level, which I think would be fine. And I guess I don't quite follow why it would be too early to start talking about this, because this stuff usually takes a while anyway, even if you talk to the neighborhoods or whoever we feel like it's necessary to talk to. So I think it is important that we start to move forward with continuing to work on our advisory boards like this, and not wait until we get into the depths of priority-based budgeting, because this is all part of it. We're actually moving forward with it now. So.
I just see this as people coming up with solutions without them being really batted around first. The Social Services Advisory Board is a very democratic function. It's a transparent function on top of that, turning it on over to staff or to the county or to priority-based budgeting initiatives that starts to remove some of that democracy and transparency that goes along with those dollars. So I've got some issues with that as well. But I'm just saying the timeline for your ideas need to start out where we get better information and feedback from the citizens we're impacting, the citizens that are actually making those decisions, before we say, hey, I think it might be a good idea to turn it over to staff. Well, you're putting the cart before the horse. Let's talk to the people of the Social Services Advisory Board and say, how do you see your function improving? What would help you make decisions? How do you think your function would differ if staff were making these decisions? That's the kind of dialogue we need to have with that board in the beginning, not at the end.
Yeah.
Well, I'd point out that this suggestion to merge the CDAC and the Social Service Funding Board has been around for a while, so we've had some opportunities to talk about it. And we have another year on this aspect of the strategic plan, so we don't have to decide this tonight. But you
I've
know,
never talked about it. You say that people have talked about it. I've never talked
well, I mean,
about it.
staff previously suggested this merger.
They wanted to merge it with the Sales Tax Audit Committee. That's not the same as the Social Services
into the
Advisory
Social
Board.
Service Funding Advisory Board.
No,
They wanted to eliminate the sales tax advisory.
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of that one.
We wouldn't go along with that. But, you know, what I'm saying is, this is where I'm coming from. This is what I'm looking at. And you know, I think we have some opportunities to improve how we're doing what we do. And also, frankly, when you take and look at the resources that we're putting into these boards from the city level and that the agencies are putting into this, it's really important that we make good use of these resources, both the cities and the other agencies. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, democracy and transparency are not cheap. And this is
Well, you know, I'd point out
citizen
that
we're talking
these
about.
are not decisions that are made by these boards. These decisions are made by the governing body.
The Social Services Advisory Board sends us a recommendation.
But we make the decisions.
Well, we basically finalize what they
Well, I
do.
mean-
We make extremely minor modifications
Well, I mean,
to it.
it's our decision when we make it. It's not their decision. So
But they put in the
they
work
recommend, we
to
decide.
create that decision.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So,
I wasn't looking for answers tonight or votes tonight. This is part of the process, is starting to talk about it and talk about it either at a commission level as well as if, talking to the various boards as we go
And
forward.
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
mhm.
I'm definitely
Always.
interested in seeing what you suggested, kind of in writing, so I can digest it and pull it apart and look at ramifications, all those ways.
It's on tape now.
And what?
It's on tape.
Yes. But for me to see how that would actually be implemented,
What it
et
would
cetera,
look
what that process would look
It's
like.
kind of like the Vice Mayor said, we have a transient guest tax fund that's, we use to make
Spend that money.
spend that money. They look at it, and the alcohol fund would be a similar thing based on Charter Ordinance 33. So if you look at Charter Ordinance 33, and you look at that, and then you look at what we're doing with the transient guest tax, it's kind of the same thing. And that way, we could try to put the CDAC together with, the people who are left on that, with the people who are left on the Social Service Funding Advisory Board, come up with a committee that would have that expertise, and it would kind of align with what we're talking about in this
Yeah.
Mayor,
recommendation.
just
Yeah.
to offer a clarification, if people are listening, the Social Service Funding Advisory Board, as it exists now, looks at those alcohol dollars.
Right.
And applies, has a separate application for them than the general fund application.
Right,
And that
okay.
application links back to that charter
Right.
ordinance.
Exactly.
The Transient Guest Tax Advisory Board was modeled after the Social Service Funding
Okay,
Advisory Board.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then also just a little history on
Yeah.
this. This used to be the arrangement. We had just a board that looked at at just the alcohol tax dollars. And we went through a number of different iterations of how the general fund dollars were allocated. At one point, it was staff-driven. At one point, it was a committee of 2 commissioners who looked at them and made recommendations back to the commission as a whole. And then it was landed on, let's merge that with with the alcohol tax
Right.
board.
Yeah.
Because you already had a group of citizens looking at the alcohol tax applications. So just
And
a
I
little bit
appreciate
of a
that
full circle
clarification.
effort
And
to-
so when we talk about full circle, now we're talking about priority-based budgeting, where you're taking a look at how you spend all the money in the general fund, for example. And so when we say, how do you align the priorities and the funding for this general fund against this general fund? I mean, the alcohol tax has this charter ordinance that spells exactly how that money is supposed to use, and it aligns perfectly with a citizen advisory board. And what I'm saying is, when we go to priority-based budgeting, when we look at our general fund, that's a little bit different thing, and I can't really expect the citizens to make those kinds of analyses.
And, this is what priority-based budgeting is going to do, is it's going to make us get down to the exact place and how it's spent. And it should, and that's the way it works. So I think it would be a good idea to split these up. But again, having discussions going forward. Yeah.
And we have another year on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to continue that
Yeah.
conversation for sure. I think that going to these boards, and particularly looking at CDAC and Affordable Housing Advisory Board, one thing that I saw in that particular recommendation was that the capital improvements in low and moderate neighborhoods, I think that I wonder if the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, if it is going to just basically consume the CDAC, if they would need to look at what their mission is to ensure that that moderate housing piece remains in there and that it isn't lost in the shuffle, because I think it's really important that we maintain that particular piece of things for that piece of funding, so that it isn't just focused on the affordable housing piece when we're talking about low income only.
The conversation I keep coming back to, and I'm trying to remember when this was. Sometimes meetings sort of run together in a timeline for me, but we had the priority-based budgeting, we'll call him the guru, came and presented. And one of the conversations he had with us was we were asking him about how other communities had embraced this. And he very politely danced around what he really wanted to say, I believe, which is it's worked really well in places where they've actually done it. But we have some communities that call it priority-based budgeting and don't actually do it, you know, and that doesn't really work so great. And he said that in a much more polite, professional manner than that, but that's at least what I gathered what he was trying to say was, if you're going to do this, you need to do this. So as we talk about a time frame for implementation of ideas as they fit within priority-based budgeting, I think our time frame ought to reflect those comments, and if we're going to do this, we ought to do it. We ought to buy in from the start. And there's no reason for us to say, well, let's pull this to the side until we know if priority-based budgeting works, and then if it does, we'll bring it in. It's not going to work if we don't bring everything in and embrace it. I didn't quote you at all in that conversation. I'm talking about what our speaker had said. And so I think we need to embrace as we go forward and utilize priority-based budgeting from the start as it applies to all aspects of our budget. You know, coordinated approach, which creates efficiencies, I think. So that would be my 2 cents on the matter. Would be that once we start this, we need to buy into it.
And we need to start looking at our advisory boards as well as everything else that we do with that in mind, that we're going to be processing it through the priority-based budgeting situation. So,
one thing that you mentioned that kind of, I don't know if I misheard you. Did you say you haven't been making appointments to the CDAC?
I've made some appointments, but I have not fully staffed that committee, and I have not fully staffed the Social Service Advisory Board. There are some vacancies.
Well, I feel like you're already implementing a solution that you've determined before getting dialogue from the public and the commissions. So I would really appreciate it if you actually fully
Well, you know,
appointed people so that they can function properly.
Well, with all due respect,
determining that this is what we're going to do, and so I'm just going to start downplaying you guys now. I really don't like that timeline.
well, with all due respect, the appointments that I make are public record. Everything that I do on this is public record. If you had concerns about this, you could have raised them.
I'm raising them now. Are you
Right.
not filling the Social Services Advisory Board?
I think
and
there are 2
CDAC?
vacancies on the Social Service Advisory Board. I think there are 2 on the CDAC.
I'm asking you to please fill those positions.
I will consider your request.
But your duty as the mayor is to appoint people. If you do not have the time or inclination to appoint people, I will be happy to assist you in the appointments of those 2 advisory boards.
If I need your assistance, I will ask for it.
If people are not getting staff to the advisory boards, then you clearly do have an issue with it. You can't just decide to stop appointing people to a board that you don't think shouldn't exist. That's not democratic. It's not transparent.
What I do is public record. You can see it. It's on our website.
All right, well, we're talking about it now. So
Okay.
I'm saying, please appoint people to those boards.
And I said,
and
I will
fill them.
consider your request.
Does that mean you're going to or not?
I will consider your request.
I need an answer.
And the answer
From the
is, I will
mayor.
consider your request.
That is not an answer.
It's the answer you're getting.
This is one of your duties as mayor, is to do this. You can't just decide to not do it.
Did you fill the vacancy on the Mental Health Board?
I talked to the county and the city to get the
It was
sheriff
vacant
on
for the
there.
entire time that you were on the commission, that
But
you were
that's
mayor.
not because I was going to downplay the existence of the mental health board.
Is it
and
because you were
eventually
ineffective?
Abolish them. This is a conversation that we had with the county, the city manager.
I didn't have it.
We told the sheriff, you just keep going to the
I didn't tell the
appointment.
sheriff
And
that.
you're changing the subject as well.
The subject is appointments. This is part of the subject.
Please do your duty. and
I
make
am doing my
appointments to the
duty.
board. No, you're not.
As I see
You're
my
not.
duty, Leslie.
You are not doing your duty.
Well, we obviously do not agree.
Mayor, I think part of this item is the purpose of trying to get some direction from the commission as a whole with how you want to proceed with next steps, if you're interested in you know, dealing with these boards and the recommendations that we have, and then we can work on what we need to do to accomplish that.
Next steps are to get feedback from the public.
We need from the whole board. And I would keep in mind that the strategic plan, priority of initiative, will continue for another year. So we have time for public input. We have time for us to consider these issues. Okay. And at this point, I'm ready to provide direction regarding the repeal of the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee. I may be alone, but that's where I am on that one.
I just want to, Commissioner Soden, I just wanted to add that the CDAC board, I have attended one of those meetings, and I think Mayor Boley did too at the same time. We discussed it actually with the board about the idea that there might be some
Let's
changes.
get a letter from them. Let's get their feedback. Let's get things in print.
So the other thing would be to return formal consideration regarding the CDAC and Affordable Housing Advisory Board. You know, I think that we've raised these issues. It might be a good idea for us to, you know, talk to people, get a goal for some feedback to provide to the staff. What do you think would be a reasonable time frame to have these discussions and come back with some direction on the second item?
As far as discussions with the boards or discussions with just with public? Everybody? I think we could make it an agenda item. Is that what we want to do?
Well, I mean, the question is, how much time do we want to?
Oh.
Because staff is asking us for some direction.
Yeah.
Are these boards not meeting in December, presumably?
Social Services Funding Board, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not aware of exactly what their timeline is, but what we could do is, if we scheduled it as an agenda item on the commission's agenda, that there's a discussion about it, we could invite the board to attend that item.
I just think that maybe in January, that might be a better time to implement that, unless we do it really early in December, which isn't enough
I'd say
time to-
February might work.
Okay.
Because we've got a minimal schedule in January.
I think the homeless issue, I think the bigger debate deals with the CDAC conversation, at least as I'm hearing it. The Homeless Issues Advisory Committee, it's the line in the staff recommendation that stands out to me is that the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee has not recently passed along recommendations to the City Commission, nor do they have a regular function identified in the City Code. So we could certainly go to them for their feedback on their board being dissolved. I don't think you're ever going to get anybody super excited about the fact that their organization is dissolved. So if we're gonna tie our hands until we have a letter from the group saying we're totally okay with being dissolved, then we're going to be tied down forever. But the reality is, if an advisory board isn't offering advice, they're not an advisory board.
And I just wonder, given the issues regarding homelessness and the conversations that have been happening, you know, have they identified, or would they identify if they had a mission, an existence that, while recognizing the county's role in that, there are issues specific to our community that might be able to be addressed at a community level, a different degree of engagement and less social service oriented and more, you know, humanistic or holistic in the approach. And I wonder if, you know, they might have some feedback on that, and that could be something that we could have a conversation around where, you know, maybe there is a feeling of, and I don't know that a board can have a feeling, but being obsolete as far as, you know, what they're tasked with and what they can do. And it could be an issue of a lack of leadership providing direction for that group. Or it could very much be we're redundant and obsolete, and this group isn't really doing what we'd like it to do, or what it could have done, or whatever. So I would be interested in that feedback. I know you're right. I mean, if somebody is dedicated to something and giving time to something, they're going to be hard pressed to give that up. So how can, if it is something that can go forward differently and there's interest in doing that, then I'm interested in having that conversation, but continuing in this way is not feasible.
I would like to point out that we did get rid of the Joint Economic Development Council, the JEDC, and we also got rid of the boards, the Lawrence Advisory Board for University Student Issues, as well as the Downtown Parking Board, and the ECO 2 commission boards without doing any, to my knowledge anyway, without doing any outreach to those boards, as well as any public input from those boards.
And if
Is
you
that
remember,
correct?
when we got rid of the ECO 2 board, the reason was the exact reason that's currently quoted for the homeless advisory. Tom Marcus's statement was, I'm not actually sure what they're advising you on. I don't have any record of advice being sent to you, which is literally what our staff recommendation says regarding the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee, is that they're not passing anything along. They're not currently advising you in anything.
And those were all done away with without input from those boards or without
Correct.
public
Well, the
input that
Social
I can
Services
recall.
Advisory Board and CDAC actually distribute monies
And
on
I
behalf of
understand.
the city, which is
they-
No,
different.
no, they make recommendations.
Yes.
They make recommendations to distribute funds on behalf of the city. So JEDC did not do that.
So let's summarize the guidance that we're providing. With regard to the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee, where are we on that?
If it's the commission desire to move forward with the recommendations, I'm not against that. I'm not opposed
Okay.
to that. I just think that there might be an opportunity in our community right now for action on that issue. But again, I'm not going to oppose the recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah, for the Homeless Advisory Board, I would not be adverse to that at this time. But I think the other ones we need to probably talk about more.
Yeah, I'm okay with the staff direction on recommendation on the Homeless Advisory Committee.
I agree.
I think it would be helpful, Mayor, if we could have a motion to that regard. And then what we would do is we would place that item on an agenda. I think we did with the other boards that we dissolved, to the extent that there were members on the boards, which I think there were 3 of them that really we found had no membership on it. But the JEDC, I think we had informed them that the intention of the commission is to do this. It would be on this such and such agenda so that they would have an opportunity if they wanted to communicate it. We could do the same.
Make a motion? Oh, yeah, we're going to do that.
Sure, come on up.
Sorry, KT.
What we do without you.
I know it.
Thank you, KT Welsh. And I have no objection about the Homeless Advisory Board. I want to back way up, and I like it that you guys are getting into it tonight, a little heat and fire. Everybody cares. I like it. It's good. But anyway, back to getting more women, people of color, LGBTQ, and lower income people on our advisory boards. I was pleased to hear that is it the Women's Foundation of Kansas City?
Women's Project.
Women's Project. And I read through their whole website. I know, Commissioner Ananda, you had a concern many meetings ago that they kind of represent, you didn't say this, the wine and cheese crowd, the middle-class women, educated women, and that's wonderful. But we also really need to reach the people, you know, who don't have time to come because they're working 3 jobs and they have kids. Somehow we have to engage those people. And so I go back to publicizing the vacancies. I'm sorry you're sick of hearing this. I've been up for years saying this. Now it's on the City Commission agenda. It's great. Now it's on the city website. The next thing to do is say when the meetings are, where they are, what the special qualifications are, because it's still mysterious. If people don't know where they have to go, what day of the week, and if there are special qualifications, and that we are encouraging people of color, LGBTQ, and people who are low income to apply, who's going to apply? We've got to do outreach. So that's my opinion. Also on the CDAC, I recently had a public official be really irritated and surprised that East Lawrence got any money from the CDAC. So I studied it. I went through the federal, the state, the local. You have to fund neighborhoods. The CDAC has very strict parameters. And so in terms of knowing what their mission is, I think it would be great if they had to reread what they are supposed to do by law, not just by ordinance. And then lastly, who is our point person on city staff to deal with advisory boards? And I have one more thing. I will have to tell you, Mayor, that it has been baffling to the neighborhood, and we've talked about it at our neighborhood meetings about why those two positions on the CDAC board have been open. These are political appointments, and so it sends a message about how you want that board to function, just to let you know. Thank you.
Okay, KT, on the city's website, on the advisory boards, if you click on the board itself, not on the vacancy page, but on the board page, it should say when the meetings are and where they are. An example is the Public Library Board. If you click on that on our website, it'll show you when that meeting is and where it is.
Okay, I looked at it. I don't remember that. Sorry.
Well,
but then special requirements, like, I mean, it's so helpful, like on the Historic Resources Commission, you've got to have so many architects, a realtor, et cetera. It'd be great to know that. That's the next piece.
And there again, usually the if there's an ordinance or a resolution that creates the board, you know, it shows what the requirements for the people who are on it. It may not show that specific vacancy, but sometimes in the vacancy on our website, it says this is a position for someone, like on the Transportation Commission, there's going to be a vacancy for someone from the Public Transit Board. So that's shown as a public transit board appointment. So,
and that's a good step.
Yeah, I mean, we're really, and this software that we're trying to get will make it so much better. It's not really very user-friendly right now. So I hear where you're coming from, and we really are interested in trying to make this better for everybody, especially people who want to say, I might want to be on the library board, I might want to be on this board. How can I compare them? Mm-hmm. You know, so that we can make decisions based on what our interests are and how these things would work for us. So that's really where we want to go, I think. And one of the reasons that this is part of our priority initiative and our strategic plan. So we can get the boards that are working really well, and the ones that aren't working that well, we can move away from, because it is so resource intensive.
We're getting there.
KT, I just wanted to point out, I'm looking at the CDAC on our website for that board, and it does say, it gives a description as to who needs to be on that board. It says 6 low mod, moderate neighborhood, and 5 at-large members. So there is some descriptions as to who needs to be on that board.
And I think that's great. I would just say take the next step. If you're not a government nerd who understands that language, explain what low mod is. Explain what at-large is. I mean, it's inside baseball a little bit, but perhaps
yeah,
this
you're
new
right.
software.
Yeah.
I'm just...
Well, I mean, I think those are the things we have to do better, and that we want to. We want to do them better.
And we're getting there. So,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
Here, I'll just add that, you know, in response to KT's prior comments on this subject, we did go back and revamp all these boards and made sure that we had the timing of the meetings, you know, what the general dates they were held, where they meet generally. And so we thought that those were really great suggestions and tried to standardize that. Also, the staff liaison is listed under each board. So to the extent that somebody might look at something and have a question about it, there's somebody that they can call, and the contact information just right there with the board information.
And some of the liaisons are actually city staff, and for some of the boards, the liaisons are actually somewhere else. Like, for example, at the library, it's Brad Allen, I believe, is the liaison. So he's not actually on city staff, he's the director of the library, but he's the one that's listed on that liaison. So we have this interesting situation where some of the liaisons are on staff and some of them are actually out in these other organizations. So do we have other public comment? Okay. Thank you, KT. Appreciate the reminder.
I had one quick thing more generally around the strategic plan that I wanted to mention, because I've mentioned several times that I want to add some thoughts on that issue. And I don't have something for you all tonight, which was my intent to do, but the more conversations that I've had The more I've realized that what I want to offer is a framework, more like one of those vision pieces that doesn't have a goal. And most of the goals under the strategic plan are very measurable. But the issues that I want to bring forward are around sustainability. So kind of what Leslie mentioned earlier regarding like alternative energy, et cetera, and equity. Those are issues to me that are more a framework that should be used in answering any question that comes before the commission. These are the kinds of questions that we should be looking at. And so one of the things that I'm going to do, because it's not something specific to the strategic plan, is bring it as a commission item at some point after I've had an opportunity to talk about staff, about feasibility, about what that could look like, not to get it in place prior to the conversation with the commission, but so that I have an idea of the potential of what that could look like, and a framework for the framework that I would like to bring forward. So I just wanted to provide that information because I know it's something I've been talking about, but when we're talking about things like equity and sustainability, it's not something that's ever finished. And so I want to have it in a location that's going to be most useful and have the most impact, even long term when we're developing a new way in which we make decisions. So.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay. Other comments before we? Okay, I believe we were at the point of a motion being made.
I make a motion that we eliminate the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee. Is that good enough? Sherry?
I would suggest that you, the motion be direct placement of that repeal on a future commission agenda.
And that we have that repeal on a future agenda item.
Second.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then with regard to the second thing, I think what the direction we were saying was we'd like to have that come back as a discussion item in February. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make that?
Yes, I think if we
provide
have a
sufficient
motion
direction
to that effect would be
Okay.
great too.
Did you just make that motion?
I'll move that we return the consideration of merging the Community Development Advisory Committee and the, well, I guess I'm not saying I want to merge that committee in because I don't want to put 7 new people on that. So I think my motion would be that we return consideration of the CDAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and the Social Service Funding Board to an agenda in February.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from the mayor, a second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And I think that's that. Anything else on the strategic plan, or is that it?
That'd be it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. This is, I guess, commission items. As part of looking at the advisory board stuff, I looked at the Transportation Commission Resolution number 7172, and as a commission item, I'd like to point out that the composition of that commission is 9 members. One of them is the University of Kansas shall appoint 1 student to represent its interests. I don't believe that that's what we actually have on the, Donna Holteen is representing the university, and she's an employee of the university, I think, rather than a student. So I think we need to look at that resolution and just not be so directive to KU in who they want to have represent them. The other thing that I saw on there too was something that I brought up when we did the resolution, and that was that there'd be 1 person representing the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, and I believe they've stepped away from funding the positions in Livewell that we're doing that representation. So, and I had a conversation with Stephen Koprentz, who had served on the Transportation Commission with me years ago, and he suggested that we have more at-large. So if we were going to do something in that resolution anyway, I'd say that we'd change the University of Kansas item and the Health Department so that the Health Department would be eliminated and just have one at-large and one KU rep that they pick. So,
Was
that's-
there a reason that it was a student?
I can't remember.
Anybody know?
If any of the staff can comment on that, I
Yeah,
don't recall
yeah.
the specific discussion.
You know, I don't think it's ever been a student. I mean, I think, was Danny Kaiser or somebody on there? I can't remember.
Was it because presumably they're the writers?
Yeah, but I mean, we don't have any, that could be right. We have somebody representing the PTAC, the Public Transit Advisory Committee. So anyway, I just bring that up as something I'd like to take a look at.
Yeah. I would be fine with that change. Yeah, with the student, I mean, I imagine it's hard if they're 3-year appointments to keep a student on there.
Short of appointing a freshman, right? Or someone on my graduation plan, either way.
Yeah. So I would be fine with those changes.
I think we should just refer it to staff to review.
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to do, if that's okay. I don't know if we need a motion for that.
Do we need a motion?
I think we have direction to look at it, and we can
Okay, so
schedule it for
other
future
commission
discussion.
items?
I have a couple items. I haven't been able to attend the EDC board, so I think it would be good if we perhaps had another commissioner on that. Jennifer, Matt.
When do they meet?
They just met, they meet quarterly. They just met Friday, I think it was,
What time?
9 in the morning. Maybe you and Jennifer can check
We're
it
probably
out.
going to reshuffle.
So we're going to do a whole seat change here in a month, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
So maybe better just to wait.
Okay. And then my other item, Candy Davis sent emails to us wanting to get the rental registry back on the agenda for discussion. So I think we should.
I would like to hold off on that. I think it needs to be discussed. We've got so much on our plate right now that it's something I would probably put down as a lower priority at some point. But to do it right now, I'm not sure if I'd want to do it right away, if that's what you're talking about.
I think we should have a listening session or a study session and see what changes are proposed first. Maybe it's something that staff needs to look at more.
'Cause her email was specific to long-term, wasn't it? At least the one I received.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I just remember City Manager Tom's concerns as well about the rental registry program. So I think that there's several changes and reviews that perhaps need to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But first, we need to talk about it and have staff look at it. So that's why I'm asking for it to
Yeah,
be on a
yeah.
future agenda item.
Yeah. I guess I'm concerned about doing this now or in the near future because it's a very significant topic. And we have a lot of issues that we're working on now. We've got Horizon 2040. We've got priority-based budgeting. We've got the strategic plan. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing and that we're asking staff to do. And I understand that Candy Davis has some issues that she wants to talk about, but I doubt that she's the only one, if we opened it up, that would actually come and have issues. I think there would be issues from the real estate community. I think there'd be issues from the landlord community. I think there'd be issues from the neighborhoods. And so to open that whole thing up, I don't see a tweak to this program. And I think that's what she's asking us to do, is to just tweak it. So I'm really reluctant to say, oh yeah, we can add that to everything else that we're asking staff to do and that we're working on ourselves. Horizon 2040 is a big deal, and we're going to be having a lot of conversations about that. So I agree we need to do this, but I'm with the vice mayor on this. I think we need to say maybe that should be part of our strategic plan a year from now, or maybe when we get some of these other things done, then we can do it. But
I don't have any potential changes or solutions in mind. I'm just, there are people, and our city manager is one of them, that sees that we need to make some changes to rental registry.
Yeah.
I
forgot this.
It needs to be just a future discussion. I don't have any staff direction beyond putting it on a future agenda right now. So,
Well, I mean, I kind of forgot to say we're also in the process of coming up with a new city manager. So there are all these things to do. And I don't want to mislead people and say, oh, we're just going to talk about it and then we're not going to do anything about it.
well, it's hard to say this when we're about to finish a meeting at 7:10 at night, to say that we don't have time for things.
So I wonder if it's something that, you know, one of the things that we've brought up before, we being me, the future agenda items and the future study session items have like the parking lot section essentially, that we have intention. It's there, it's present, it's there every month. It's not the fire that we're putting out at the moment, but it is something that we are, one, aware that a conversation will need to occur, that we're not placing it on a dated future agenda, but it is something that is a conversation that will happen. And I wonder if that would be the appropriate kind of next step for this particular topic, particularly since we have, you know, multiple folks, not just a single email, saying that, you know, this is worth taking a look at. We just have to do it in a timely manner that is consistent with the other things that we're looking at.
And what's specific to that email, I just went back and reread it, and the entire email is specific to long-term rental registration, so that to say we should have a conversation about this, I mean, we literally just did. We had that meeting went 6 hours that night, and we had 6 hours of conversation. So if the issue is that we don't like the outcome of how that 6-hour conversation went, that's different than saying we need to have a conversation, because we did. A room full of people that stood up and talked.
I would suggest that we just put it on the to be determined section. Perhaps we could get Tom's better feedback as well as to what he wanted to look into as well. I'm sure Scott has some ideas of how to improve the program. I don't want to hang everything on Candy's email here.
You know, we used to have the list, the
We have it
ongoing
right
list
here.
on the agenda of projects or subjects that needed to be discussed, and we kind of got away from that, so.
It's right
Well,
here
I
to
mean-
be determined.
It's still there, I think, isn't it?
Future
Remember, we
agenda
used to have a
items.
whole long list of things that.
Is
Yeah.
Horizon 2040 on there?
No.
So there's to be decided on the future agenda.
Mayor, I might just interject. This will remain visible to you. Usually around March, we start supplying the commission with our annual reports, and it's included in our annual reports of the rental issues. I tend to agree with the mayor that we have some very large things going through our office, including our first round of, I don't know how many special use permit applications we got in for the short-term rental code we just supplied. That'll keep both sides of the department pretty busy for a while. But I'm appreciative of Tom's comments about the program. We do have opinions on its strength and weaknesses and those kinds of things. I think it's good to have those discussions. I don't think it's going to get lost over this next year, but I don't see a real opportunity to work very much on what I consider to be a pretty big undertaking here in the very first quarter of 19. So I think we should have the topic discussed as well. I kind of appreciated the comment about maybe in a strategic planning vein as well, that kind of directs larger issues about neighborhoods, and it was sort of underlying there in the last strategic plan, but those are some of my thoughts just off the cuff.
Yeah, I'd see this as something that very likely could come into that strategic plan that we do in November of next year.
And I do think it's going to be a big topic.
Yeah, it is. It's a big topic, and we need to do it. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just, you can't do everything all at once.
Yeah. It should be.
Challenge accepted.
You go.
Well, Tom is leaving soon, so we need to
Yeah,
get his input.
Definitely.
I'm not saying we
yeah.
need to schedule this next week or even next month, but our 2BD goes out all the way to past January, so we need to get Tom's opinion before he leaves.
Okay.
Okay.
Other
you-
commission items?
I did have a couple of things that I was hoping to get updates on, not necessarily where we are tonight, but just something that I would like to have updates either in a city manager's report or otherwise, where we are in the Safe Bar conversations and where we are in GARE, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity that the commission gave direction to join. I'm wondering what next steps look like for that in particular and where we might expect to see the Safe Bar conversation back.
Okay.
That's it.
The first thing you stated you wanted us to look at, I got the GRE, but.
Safe Bar?
The Safe Bar, okay, thank you.
We could certainly follow up with an update on those.
Thank you.
Other commission items? Okay. City manager's report.
So the first item has to do with the comprehensive annual financial report and just a clarification regarding how we showed cash on that statement. That is really a combination of restricted cash and investments. We did make a note of that in our preliminary offering statement recently and updated that in the CAFR on the city's website. So we just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. The October utility billing monthly report is there for your consumption, as is the October sales tax report. And you can see that we are showing a little bit of an increase above the same period for the October report from 2017. And we appear to be on track to hit the revised 2018 budget number, at least at this point. The October building permit report is also there for you. We continue to be very strong with our total value of building permits. There was a question at the earlier city manager's report this month related to a memo that staff provided about the community poverty rate, and there was some question about how students were accounted for. So we provided an update here that, in fact, the college students that reside with parents and relatives and also those that live in group quarters are excluded from the Census Bureau figures, so that provides a bit of clarification with regard to the data that we had cited. There previously was a discussion about the standard traffic ordinance and getting our standard traffic ordinance as revised for our local community online. So work is proceeding with the city clerk's office, and that document should be listed on the website here sometime soon. And for the future agenda items that we have for you coming up at your December 4th meeting, we have the Queens Road issues, transportation policies, a cooperative agreement related to disproportionate minority contact for traffic and pedestrian stops that include Douglas County, Eudora, and Baldwin City, and the legislative policy statement for your consideration. And you can see there was a discussion at the last meeting about the animal control ordinance that's slated there December 18th, along with EMS billing agreement, which is an annual agreement between us and the county, and the police facility construction manager at risk selection recommendation that we'll have for you.
Is it possible for us to consider the animal control ordinance on the 4th?
I think that we may have some challenge with doing that from a timing standpoint. So let me ask if Tony might comment on that.
the Humane Society representatives on Friday, and they submitted a draft that was a totally brand new ordinance. And we want it to be formatted so that the public can track what changes are being made, so that there's greater transparency and an understanding by the public what the actual changes are. So we're going back and revising the ordinance, incorporating their ideas, but reformatting it. So our staff's working really diligently, meeting almost daily to make it happen, but I don't see that it will be ready for the Commission's consideration on the 4th.
The last day for the director of the Humane Society is the 14th of December, so she wouldn't be available for the 18th. I think it's important that her expertise is available for this discussion. So is there something we can do to make sure that she's part of this discussion?
They do have an attorney that has been part of the drafting, and she will be here.
I know, but I'm saying that I think the Humane Society director is a very important person for this conversation, and I think it's important for us to have her included in this conversation. So will make that point to my fellow commissioners and say, do we want to have Kate Medji in this conversation? If so, we need to make sure it's done differently than what's shown in this agenda memo.
She indicated that she wouldn't be willing to engage in that conversation.
Her last day with the Humane Society is the 14th. She's got a job in Florida.
Gotcha.
Mayor, I think it's just a challenge for us timing-wise to do that. That with the holiday here this week, getting something that would be turned around and ready for your meeting on the 4th.
What about the study session on the 11th?
I think the only way to do that would and I think need Tony's thoughts on whether that would be possible. But typically you don't take formal action at the work session except for a consent agenda.
We've done business meetings tacked on to.
It would just need to be called that way, I think.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's a possibility. I haven't, reached out to them. At least that would be within her employment with the Humane Society, which I think, again, she's a voice of the Humane Society that's been significant in our community. And, but this is where I am on it.
I do know I've met with her, and I know that she has been kind of the main driver of this ordinance as far as putting it together. That's my understanding.
And, Commissioner Herbert has expressed concern about this issue. I've expressed concern about this issue.
I will say, though, and to kind of back up what Tony said, that when I met with Kate, the meeting with Kate was actually very short because she basically said, I want to turn the floor over to my attorney who has essentially crafted this and has worked with this all over the United States. And so while I certainly think Kate is a valuable resource to our community, and it's sad to lose her, no doubt, I think so long as the attorney that they've worked with is in the room, I'm not sure that we're losing that knowledge base.
Okay.
But man, I'd love to have Kate here if we could, but if
okay.
The other items that you have coming up on the work sessions, the December 11th meeting, you'll have a presentation from the Chamber related to economic development activities, and then an update from the Lawrence Community Shelter. We do have a modification, this downtown master plan item that we had for January will not work for the consultants, so we'll be removing that date and sharing some additional information with you here upcoming. And the Affordable Housing Advisory Board did have a discussion at their last meeting, and they would like to attend your February 12th work session item to have some follow-up discussion. They did schedule their retreat for January on the 14th, I believe. And also, we have our new finance director that has started today, and I'm going to turn it over to Casey to provide an introduction.
Jeremy, if you want to stand up. We're pleased to welcome Jeremy Wilmoth to our team as our new finance director. His first day was officially yesterday, so as the mayor said, he came back, so that's a good sign.
But he doesn't yet have a nameplate, so we're still on the fence about him.
Yeah, and normally Bobby would have made like a mock-up, but she is,
But she's also on the fence about him?
no, she's on vacation, and so no one thought to make him a temporary nameplate, so sorry, Jeremy, that was on me.
Welcome,
But,
Jeremy.
Welcome.
Prior to coming to Lawrence, he most recently served as a city manager in the city of Winfield. He's also served, or sorry, city administrator in the city of Winfield. He's also served as a county administrator in Cali County for a number of years and worked in a number of different finance positions as finance director, deputy finance director in cities and counties in both Kansas and Missouri. So I'm looking forward to the expertise he brings to our team, and I'm sure you'll all get to know him over the coming weeks.
Great.
And finally, best wishes for a great Thanksgiving to all of you.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Which takes us to calendar.
They will be rescheduling the community conversation on race, is my understanding. So when there's a new date for that,
Okay.
we'll put that on the
I think
calendar.
the speaker got stuck in
again.
New York.
Something
Oh,
happened.
it wasn't held.
Correct.
Saturday.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
On Rex.
Any other meeting items? No? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.